In just over an hour at 4 o'clock, BBC1 joins forces with Stereo Radio 1 to experience the sight and sound of Paul Young in concert. But now we go back to Martin Mere in Lancashire for the final report from Tony Soper and Roger Lovegrove on today's Birdwatch.
Welcome to our New Year Birdwatch with live cameras. And I've been joined again by the ornithologist Roger Lovegrove. We're looking out over the best part of 400 acres of flooded pasture land here, open freshwater and wet meadows, and a whole herd of hooper swans. It's the sort of place where wildfowl, swans and geese and ducks like to spend the winter. Martin Mere, it's up the coast, north of Liverpool and close to the Ribble estuary. Great concentrations of birds come here from Iceland, from Russia, Siberia, the high Arctic, some by way of northern Europe and the Dutch coast. And they come here to sunny Lancashire to escape the Arctic and enjoy a relatively mild winter. Wildfowl Trust makes them welcome here, both Buick swans and hooper swans. It's a good place to see the two, really. We think of Slimbridge, Peter Scott's Wildfowl Trust headquarters, as a place for Buick swans, and this place, Martin Mere, for hoopers, but the fact is that you can see them both here. It's just that this place holds the biggest concentration of hoopers, the birds which come from Iceland, in winter. These are some pictures which we actually filmed earlier today, which we recorded earlier this morning in a rather early morning light when there was a touch of sun. Mainly because they'll help us to just distinguish the difference between the two. The hoopers are clear enough, big yellow patch on the beak, a big wedge-shaped yellow patch.
And that's nice because right behind it there's a Buick, very similar indeed, but you can immediately see there's much less yellow on the bill. It doesn't go down as far towards the tip as it does on the hooper. Slightly smaller swan then, more compact, shorter necked, a bit rounder headed too. There's a nice family party of Buicks drifting past there.
You've got to say, Roger, that it is really very difficult indeed to tell those young ones, isn't it? If it weren't for the fact that they very conveniently stay close to their parents.
They do. They're always with the parents all through the winter, so it makes identification of them nice and easy. These are Russian swans from the Arctic in Siberia, from evocative sounding places like the Taimyr River and Novaya Zemlya and the Lena River. High tundra swans. And they're, for nice comparison again, a hooper.
Distinctly larger.
Distinctly larger, a flatter forehead, a lot more extensive yellow on the bill. The Icelander, the birds that come to us every winter from Iceland. Alert, looking round.
Smashing bird. Well, I hope that sorted out the difference between those two. Easier said than done, I think. But now we're back live again, looking at this herd of hoopers, which is actually literally just outside the hide which we are in. But they're actually being photographed from a camera which is out on the marsh and is not linked to, or rather it's linked to a cameraman, but it doesn't have a cameraman standing there operating it, which is really a very useful thing to be able to do, because the fact is if we went out there to operate that camera, all those birds would be up and away in a shot. They would be straight out away. So there's a camera right out on the marsh, which is controlled remotely by the cameraman who's in here with us inside the hide. He can make it pan left, pan right, he can tilt it up and down, he can zoom it, he can do all the things that you do with a camera who's out there, just almost as effectively as if he were out there with it. But we've got other cameras as well. They're disposed strategically in the public observation hides overlooking the mere here. There's one, incidentally, that's a bit of bog oak there, which shows that at one time this was forest, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Now it's a shallow peaty lake. And from the Hale hide, for the Hale Ornithological Society's hide, you can look out over a wholly different scene, lots of ducks.
And it's muddy, really muddy, and it's made muddy, of course, by the constant passage of ducks' feet there. And they're over here because the Wildfowl Trust put down here loads of potatoes each day for the geese, but also because the ducks, in this case the mallard in particular, come and feed on them. This is a food, of course, which is rich in starch and sugars. That's why we eat them ourselves. and it's an immensely important source of food for these hordes of wildfowl that come here. The mallard, interesting, of course, because potatoes not native to this country, and it was about 100 years or so ago that mallard first discovered that you could actually eat potatoes at the time of the potato blights in Ireland. And since then, of course, other species too have learned. Pintail is another duck species which has learned that you can eat it. And here's another waterfowl.
But not moorhens, I think.
The moorhen. The moorhen too, with a better shaped bill, I suppose, for chiselling away at the potatoes. An all-purpose waterside bird, isn't it? That's fairly omnivorous. Feeds on land.
Open there. It's quite a skulky bird very often, isn't it? Likes to have a bit of cover, not far away.
It likes to be able to get to the security of water again very quickly if it can do.
It's really having a go at that spud, isn't it?
Fine adult moorhen there, I think. In good colour and good plumage at this time of year.
And it has not come from Russia or Iceland.
Oh no,
of course. This is a local bird.
Yes, and there's a good population of them in the ditches and dikes here at Martin Mere. Mallard again, and a coot going across too. Another bird which one would expect to see exploiting a ready source of food that's provided like this. But above all, it's the mallard which really enjoy themselves on this. And Martin Mere can support an enormous number of them. There are probably 2,800 or so here at present.
And these are mostly Lancashire birds, I think, in fact.
Yes, I think that the vast proportion of them are local birds.
Because, of course, ducks, these mallard ducks, come in all sorts of guises, don't they? They can be farmyard pond ducks, they can be genuinely wild ducks from enormous distances, or they can be kind of half and half, sort of partial migrants. That's from the hail hide. We've got another camera, which is tucked away inside the bungalow, which belongs to the curator of the reserve here, Janet Keir. And from inside there, we've got a camera with a big telephoto lens on it, which looks out over an artificial island, an island made of cockle shells. There's bags of ice here at the moment, of course. There's the bungalow, and actually the camera is in the hide in that sort of temporary building, which is halfway along it there. And as you can see, he's got a nice view, as Janet Keir has from her sitting room window, I'm bound to say, of some mallard ducks which are courting. A pair of mallards courting. These are birds which pair very early in the season. I mean, they're actually paired up and courting in August, as early as August. And at this time of year, they're certainly not thinking of laying eggs, but they go through the motions, and they're practicing what will happen for real a bit later on.
You can see why they're called ducks, can't you?
Plenty of records of unfortunate females getting drowned, aren't there?
And you can see how and why, yes. But this is not mating for real, of course, and there's no fertilisation going on there this early in the year.
No, he is not capable of fertilising her, in fact, is he, at this stage?
It's the developing of the pair bond and the strengthening of it. And here's more mallard against the side of the island.
They're also well organised. They're well organised for mating in the water, incidentally, aren't they? Because unlike most birds, they do have a penis, these things, and they can, so that they are able to copulate in the water.
Right. This is so necessary for some of the wildfowl. This one getting himself back into prime conditioning. A nice lapwing again at the waterside. Bathing too. Looking after feathers. An essential part of every bird's daily routine is making sure the feathers are kept clean, tidy, and in as perfect condition as you can.
And most especially in severe weather in the winter. It's very important for them to keep warm, isn't it?
Yes, not what we necessarily think. You'd think they're trying to keep out of the water when it's really cold, but they have to even more then.
It's a paradox. One side, then the other. Lean over and do under one wing, lean over and do under the other. Lovely. These cockleshell islands here, first thing in the morning, you can sometimes get ruff there in quite big numbers. I think at this time of day we won't see any, nevertheless.
Well, these are gadwall, they're nice, much scarcer duck than mallard. These are essentially birds of lowland pools and meres, reed fringe. They like to be able to get in amongst the vegetation. And there's a nice bit of display from the drake there.
And you notice that it's the female which incites them to display. The female starts the process off. Actually, the closer you look at these gadwall, the better they look, don't they? They have a very delicate, beautiful plumage.
They're very smart duck indeed, beautiful grey vermiculations there. those drakes. And I love the shape of their head. See how steep the forehead is? And
Yes.
it's made especially steep because they raise the crown feathers at this time when they're displaying to the females. I mean, it may seem odd to us that we've got duck here which are in many cases paired and in other cases still trying to pair up at this time of year. But it is very important to them that by the time the real breeding season comes on, their pairs have been well established and long established. And here you see a good example of the female really inciting the male to start assisting her in driving others away, keeping them out of their patch.
They don't mate for life, these
No,
ducks.
they
So
just
they
mate-
do go through this process every winter so that they make the best use of the short breeding season up in the higher latitudes.
Yes, they just mate for the one season. And there's a pair which is obviously strongly mated already. And there she goes to see off an offending female. See a nice dark grey bit on the back of their heads, a sort of dark grey triangle, greyish-brown, which the drakes use in display, and you've frequently seen them turning their heads to display that bit to the females.
Oh, some goosanders. 3 drakes and a female there, and a lovely brownish head. Sawbills, ducks that dive for fish. They get quite a lot of fish in these shallow pools here. There is a lot of ice about, but for all that, there's, as you can see, still some open water. And open water is very important to these birds, just as it is in your back garden, of course. That's why we're always saying that it's important to put out drinking water in your garden for small birds there. Incidentally, if you want to venture out and join us in some bird watching, wherever you are in Britain, there will be a bird watching location specially manned by enthusiastic birdwatch guides next Sunday. It's a joint Wildfowl Trust, RSPB, Birdwatch UK. And we'll give you a telephone number to ring and more details about it at the end of our programme, Best of Birdwatch, at 5:35 tomorrow on BBC1. But for the moment, let's get back to the live birds in front of us at this very moment.
And these are teal, nice little party of teal. And they're fairly agitated and displaying, and it's a pretty classic situation here at this time of year with 5, 6, 7 drake teal, the smallest of all our duck, displaying for the favours of 1 or 2 females. And so the males are really excited and agitated, each one trying to outdo the others for the favours of the ducks there. But lovely little displays these teal have.
Lovely little
bit
bird,
of a head
isn't it?
flicking, little bit and
Oh,
head up,
nice.
and that's the main part of their display, in which they show their beautiful head feathers, and then if we're lucky and see the full display, the tail feathers as well. There it is again, and there's the tail up, the beautiful little display, head up, tail up, when they've got the female in the right position to fully appreciate it.
Highly ritualised display.
Yes, and they're manoeuvring the whole time to try and get in the right position in regard to the females to get the display to the maximum. There it is again, head flick, then head up, no tail up that time.
So he wants to show himself off at his best advantage.
Yes.
He likes her to see the back of his neck.
Beautiful bit of display again there. There are a lot of teal at Martin Mere, and again hidden in the flooded fields and ditches around here. There may be anything up to 10,000 of these birds.
Fact is that they are common throughout the British Isles in winter, aren't they? In both large parties, the ones you get here, and in small ones as well.
And they're big, long-distance travellers. A lot of these birds will have come from Eastern Europe and northern Russia.
And by way of the Dutch coast.
Yes.
Lovely buff and black patch on the tail.
And let's just watch this drake and follow him for a moment as he manoeuvres around trying to get in the right position to make the female see him. Lovely speckling on the breast we saw then. There's the female. Bit of agitation for him then. Bit of rivalry. There's a beautiful tail up again.
So the fact is that long before they migrate and shoot off back on the long journey to Russia, they will have paired up, and they'll be paired up ready for the relatively short breeding season when they must make best use of the time that's at their disposal. We must have another look at the swans, though, I think, mustn't we? Because it really, this is one of the things like the pink-footed geese. These swans are what Martin Mere is all about. 10 years ago, they had no hooper swans here. Now they've got more than anywhere else in the whole of England and Wales, and not only hoopers.
The Buick there walking across.
It is rapidly thawing here. Oh yes, you see, the fact is there's more water every moment. 2 or 3 days ago, when we first came up, there was several inches of ice on this mere, and the birds are in fact becoming slightly more dispersed as time goes by.
Just still and peaceful scene with them there, sitting on the water, resting. Feeding is fairly easy here for the hoopers. They range over a fairly wide area. And we're talking about birds here which have come entirely from Iceland, and the entire Iceland population is 10 or 11,000 birds, and the whole lot come to the British Isles in winter, mainly to Scotland and to Ireland. But this is the biggest flock in the north of England, about 200 birds at present, maybe more when there's a cold snap of weather. Birds tend to move around.
And of course, if the weather gets much worse, I mean, if it does become very cold, they will penetrate further south.
Yes, and in those circumstances, some of the birds that are left behind in Iceland, perhaps 25% or so at the beginning of the season, may up and come over to this country as well.
Now that is a smashing look at that hooper's head there, isn't it? More yellow than black on the bill. Beautiful sight. Family parties. As we were saying, it's very helpful that the juveniles, the birds of the year, stay with their parents.
It's helpful to us in identifying the young ones. It's also helpful to the swans, which is, of course, why they do it. Not only do the adults thereby show them the way here, but it also means that when they're in this country and feeding on the pastures and so on through the winter, they're much more efficient at seeing off competitors, other parties of swans, than if they're solo or in pairs.
Wonderful little party just flown in and landed on the ice. In flight, they are truly majestic birds, aren't they? With a spine-tingling call.
These are hoopers.
They're very splendid flyers. And in fact, they're very high flyers as well, aren't they? There's an extraordinary record of these things flying at 27,000 feet, seen from an airplane, flying at 27,000 feet on migration from Iceland, which is a 700-mile trip, incidentally.
Yes, which may sound impressive, but it's even more impressive when you think of the temperatures up there, maybe minus 45 centigrade or thereabouts, with very little oxygen. It's an incredible height for the birds to fly at. And they do it in very quick time as well. In a matter of hours, they're from Iceland to the British Isles. Nice young bird there. Doesn't yet have the yellow on the bill, of course. Part of another family party. Colouring on the head is probably the remains of the juvenile plumage. You can see it on the back a little there as well. Because during their first winter, the young birds quite quickly adopt the all-white plumage and are quite difficult by the end of the winter to tell from the adults.
And what's the overall population? There must be something like, what, 40,000 or so of these birds?
Of the hoopers. Well, the hoopers,
yeah.
It's 10 or 11,000 Icelandic
But in Europe
birds.
altogether?
Oh, in Europe it's a lot more than that. Yeah. pushing off someone else's family's young bird, I think, there. They keep the family parties very tight.
Shelduck going across the back there. Of course, at this time of day, they put out food as sort of supplementary rations for these birds. There's a barnacle goose there, bottom left. They put out supplementary rations, which the
And a
collared
collar
doves take advantage of. Chris Tomlinson goes out with a wheelbarrow full of grain, which he puts down for them, and the swans gently make their way across to get their supplementary rations. Geese there as well, taking advantage. The barnacles
But being
coming in
shoveled
from the
out of the
back.
way, aren't they? Pink feet in the front.
The swans come to this place because it's safe, really. They're relatively undisturbed and there are no predators for them here. But there is more to it than that. There's a lot of active management of the pasture, of the land here. The crops are grown to suit the birds, the water levels are controlled, and there is this supplementary food put down as well. They're used to the man who goes out to take the grain, Chris Tomlinson. They know he's going out at the same time, twice a day, so they tolerate him. Whereas if we went out there now, they'd be off like a shot, wouldn't they?
Yes, they habituate to the food supply and to the timing. And it's interesting to see them here feeding in the water's edge there and scooping up the grain. I fancy quite a lot more easily in that way than they do from dry land, because it's not the most easily digestible food for them naturally, I suppose, and they need quite a bit of water to help them take it in.
But it's power-packed.
Carbohydrates and proteins are a very important additional supplementary source of food for them. For the rest of the time here, when they're not sitting, resting on the dry land or on the water, they fly off considerable distances to some of the other pastures to feed on grasses there, sometimes grain from stubbles, and occasionally perhaps potatoes left in fields as well.
Then they'll come back here to roost.
They come back here for the feeding each day and then to roost at night. But here at Martin Mere, unlike some of the other Wildfowl Trust sites, it's the hoopers that come to the grain and not the Buicks. And it's interesting that the Buicks haven't cottoned on to it yet. Perhaps it just is that the hoopers are here first and deter the Buicks from taking advantage of it.
Shelduck in there, taking advantage.
And a Canada goose, bottom left.
There's no doubt that swans will go on feeding for a while yet before they settle down, as these are already beginning to settle down, to roost for the night in safety. A bit of preening, a little bit of comfort, and then a safe place for the night. We're going to go on watching them because now is the time that, with a bit of luck, yet more of the pink-footed geese will be flying in enormous numbers, filling the sky with their flight patterns and these swans on the ground below. Lots of wild music. Celebrating 40 years of Peter Scott's Wildfowl Trust. From our birdwatch at the Wildfowl Trust Reserve, Martin Mere in Lancashire, and from Roger Lovegrove and me, goodbye and a happy new birdwatching year.